London, 1872. The heart of the largest empire the world had ever known. A city paved with old, ruled by a queen, empowered by the engines of industry. But there was another London, a city of ghosts hidden behind the veil of coal smoke. Step off the main boulevards and the marble turned to mud. The air didn't smell of spices and tea. It tasted of sulfur and rot. This video is a descent into that shadow world. Through the eyes of artist Gustave Doré, who walked these streets when they were at their darkest, we explore the slums, the prisons, and the riverbanks where the forgotten millions fought just to survive the night. Welcome to Seven Dials. To the wealthy, a place to avoid. To the poor, the only world they knew. Notice the architecture, not of buildings, but of humanity, pressed into suffocating canyons of brick. Here, silence was a luxury nobody could afford. The air vibrated constantly with the cries of costermongers, the clatter of iron wheels on stone, and shouts of children who had never seen a green field. In 1872, space was more valuable than silver. Families didn't rent houses, they rented corners. A single room might hold 3 generations sleeping in shifts on floors damp with the city's filth. A hive of survival where the only privacy existed inside your own mind. If the slums were a prison of poverty, Newgate was a prison of stone. This is the exercise yard, a deep architectural throat that swallowed the condemned. The prisoners walked in an endless, dizzying circle called the mill. They were forbidden to speak, forbidden to look up at the slice of gray sky above. Only the rhythmic dragging of leather boots and clinking of iron chains broke the silence. By the 1870s, Newgate was rotting from the inside. Walls wept with moisture. Cells were freezing in winter, ovens in summer. For these men, time had stopped. They were ghosts long before the hangman's rope touched their necks. Travel east to Whitechapel. The air here was thick with pickled herring, curing tobacco, and unwashed wool. This scene captures the relentless energy of the Jewish quarter. London was a magnet for those fleeing European persecution. They arrived with nothing but clothes on their backs and a desperate need to work. Notice the chaos. It isn't violent, it's industrious. Every inch of pavement is a shop. If you had a basket, you were a merchant. If you had a voice, you were an auctioneer. This was the engine room of the East End, fueled by cheap tea and endless ambition. But all roads led to the river, the Thames. In 1872, this wasn't a blue waterway. It was a brown, churning artery of trade and filth. The river was the city's sewer and its bank account. Look at the tangle of masts. Ships from India, China, and the Americas crowded so tightly you could almost walk across their decks from shore to shore.
Down in the mud lived the mudlarks, children who waded through toxic sledge at low tide, searching for dropped coal, old nails, or bones, anything that could be sold for a farthing. To them, the river wasn't beautiful, it was a monster that occasionally offered up a gift. When the sun went down, the true face of the city was revealed. For thousands, night brought a terrifying question: where will I sleep? This image captures a bull's-eye lantern cutting through darkness, revealing the casual ward, men, women, and children huddled in doorways, wrapped in thin rags. 1 penny bought you a bench indoors. 2 pennies, a rope to sleep on. Nothing? You faced the streets. And in the dark of 1872, the streets belonged to the desperate, the thieves, and predators who hunted in the fog. For some, London's reality was too much to bear. Hidden in East End alleys were the opium dens. The air here was sweet and heavy, a place where time dissolved. Sailors, locals, and lost souls gathered on hard wooden beds to inhale poppy smoke. For a few copper coins, the cold, wet streets faded away. Doré captured this lethargy perfectly. Vacant stares, limbs heavy with sleep. A temporary death, a few hours of peace stolen from relentless hardship. To keep London's lights burning, men descended into hell. This is the gasworks. While the wealthy dined under soft gas lamps, this was the reality of their fuel. Doré drew this like a vision from Dante's Inferno. heat so intense it peeled skin, air, a toxic cocktail of sulfur and coal dust. These men, half naked and blackened by soot, were the city's stokers, working 12-hour shifts in temperatures that could boil water. A brutal exchange, their lungs and lives given up to keep the empire visible in the dark. If the slums were quiet desperation, the main streets were roaring chaos. This is Ludgate Hill. Look at the crush, a paralyzed artery of the city. In 1872, there were no traffic lights, only the will of drivers and muscle of horses. This engraving captures gridlock so dense the city simply stopped. Notice Doray's detail, a funeral hearse stuck beside a beer wagon, the dead in the trunk, trapped in the same mud. Victorian London, a machine that never stopped, even to let the dead pass. But for some, the noise, the labor, the poverty led to only one place, the river. This image is known as the Bridge of Sighs. It captures a tragedy that happened every night. A destitute woman, likely homeless or ruined in society's eyes, contemplating the freezing Thames. In a city of millions, isolation was the ultimate killer. The water offered a silence the streets could not. This isn't just a drawing of a bridge. It's a portrait of the moment when hope runs out. It reminds us that beneath grand architecture and imperial power, London was built on human bones.
Looking back at these engravings, we don't just see ink on paper, we see the DNA of the modern world. Victorian London was a brutal machine that chewed up the poor to feed progress. But through artists like Doray, the people in the shadows were not erased. They stare back at us from the fog, reminding us that every great city is built on human stories, some triumphant, some tragic. Thank you for walking the shadows with us. Subscribe to explore more vanished history.